The snow was relentless. Thick flakes pounded the windshield of the car as they made their way up the winding mountain road. Two couples, Liam and Emily, Alex and Sarah, were looking forward to a much-needed getaway. They had rented a lodge deep in the mountains, hoping to escape their hectic city lives for a weekend of relaxation and fun. Little did they know, something else awaited them in the isolation of the snow-covered lodge. When they arrived, the lodge stood majestic yet foreboding, its wooden structure partially obscured by the swirling snow. Inside, it was warm and inviting, with a large fireplace crackling and a cozy atmosphere that quickly put them at ease. They spent the first evening by the fire, sharing stories and laughter, the outside world forgotten. The storm worsened overnight, and by morning, they found themselves completely snowed in. The windows were frosted over, blocking any view of the outside world. With no phone reception and the road impassable, they were cut off from civilization. Initially, they took it in stride, thinking it would be an adventure. But as the day wore on, an unsettling feeling crept into the lodge. Strange noises echoed through the halls, soft whispers, barely audible, but unmistakable. Emily was the first to notice, brushing it off as the wind. But as the hours passed, the whispers grew louder and more distinct. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and the temperature inside the lodge began to drop, despite the roaring fire. One evening, while preparing dinner, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to find a translucent figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, eyes hollow. She stared at him for a moment before vanishing into thin air. Alex stumbled back, trying to rationalize what he had seen. But deep down, he knew it was something beyond the natural world. The others noticed Alex's change in demeanor, but he dismissed their concerns, not wanting to scare them. However, the whispers grew louder, filling the lodge with an eerie symphony of voices. Sarah began hearing her name called in the night, and Liam felt an icy breath on his neck as he slept. The nights became unbearable. The temperature plummeted, and the once cozy lodge turned into a freezing tomb. The firewood dwindled, and no matter how much they stoked the fire, it never seemed to warm the room. The whispers turned into wails, cries of anguish and despair that echoed through the halls. Emily found an old journal hidden in a drawer, its pages yellowed with age. It belonged to a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the lodge with her husband over a century ago. As she read through the journal, a horrifying story unfolded. Margaret wrote of a harsh winter that had left them snowed in, just like Liam and Emily's group. Her husband had ventured out for help but never returned. Margaret was left alone, slowly succumbing to the cold and starvation. Her final entries were desperate, filled with madness and terror, speaking of a wraith that haunted the lodge, feeding on the despair of those trapped within its walls. Emily shared the journal with the others, and fear took hold of them. They realized they were not alone in the lodge. The Winter Wraith, as Margaret had called it, was a malevolent spirit that thrived on the suffering of its victims. The Wraith's presence grew stronger with each passing hour, feeding on their fear and hopelessness. Desperate to escape, they decided to brave the storm and make their way down the mountain. As they prepared to leave, the Wraith made its presence known. It materialized before them, a figure shrouded in frost and shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The temperature dropped to unbearable levels, and they could see the breath crystallizing in the air. They fought to stay together, but the Wraith was relentless. It separated them, preying on their deepest fears and insecurities. Sarah was the first to fall, her screams echoing through the lodge as the Wraith claimed her. Liam and Emily managed to find each other, but Alex was nowhere to be found. With no other choice, they fled into the storm. The wind howled around them, and the snow blinded their path. They stumbled through the drifts, the Wraith's whispers haunting their every step. Exhausted and freezing, they finally reached a small cabin, a remnant of an old mining camp. They huddled together, praying for the storm to pass. The night was long and filled with terror. The Wraith's presence was palpable, its icy fingers reaching for them through the walls of the cabin. In the early hours of the morning, the storm began to abate. With the first light of dawn, they ventured back to the lodge, hoping to find Alex and Sarah, but dreading what they might discover. The lodge was eerily silent, the once roaring fire now reduced to ashes. They found Sarah's lifeless body near the fireplace, her face frozen in a mask of terror. Alex was never found, his fate left to the cruel whims of the mountain. Liam and Emily were rescued later that day, found huddled together in the small cabin. They were taken to a nearby town where they recounted their ordeal to the authorities. No one believed their story of the Winter Wraith, dismissing it as the ravings of traumatized minds. But Liam and Emily knew the truth. The Wraith was real, and it still haunted the snow-covered lodge, waiting for its next victims. Years later, the lodge remains abandoned, a dark silhouette against the snowy landscape. Locals speak of strange lights and sounds emanating from the lodge during the harshest winters. And those who dare to venture too close sometimes disappear, their bodies never found, leaving only the echoes of their screams carried by the wind.